Welcome, welcome, Allysha.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm just going to start with sharing my screen and I'll jump right in. Really looking forward to briefing you all and hearing some of your questions. Can you all see this okay? Okay, great. So I'm Allysha Lorber. I'm the capital planning chief with DOT. I started in this position back in January. It's been a really exciting transition for me. I spent over 20 years in the consulting industry, and working in the public sector is quite a change, but it's been a lot of fun, and we have a lot of really great things on the horizon. So today I want to give you guys a little peek behind the curtain on how our capital planning program works. And I want to start with talking about our complete streets policy, which is really important to how we do our capital planning program, but also in how we are prioritizing equity as a part of our overall program, and taking a look at some of the funding patterns that we've had over time and the projections, and how we can really leverage that funding to support our capital programming goals, and looking at a couple of our future project priorities. So to start, we have a complete street policy in Baltimore, and I may be biased when I say this, but I do think it's one of the best in the nation. This was adopted a few years ago, and some of the things that make our complete street program different from some of the other cities out there that have really strong complete street programs as well is that ours is actually in an ordinance. It's mandated by law that we really have to be implementing this, and we're reporting on it annually. And the other thing that makes our program unique and different is that it has a very strong component on equity and leveraging equity, prioritizing investments in areas of need. So there are a lot of different factors when we're looking at prioritizing our projects, and there are a lot of needs. Transportation has a really important role in society and economic development, quality of life. And so we really need to be looking at safety and infrastructure conditions, leveraging growth as much as possible. But equity is something that we're taking very seriously and is a very important priority for our program overall. And it has a very high weighting factor in our capital programming. So how do we assess equity? A lot of people, think of it in different ways, and a lot of people have different types of needs. And we really need to be thinking about all of the people in Baltimore. So the way that we've done it is we've taken a look at a lot of different demographic patterns and constituencies that have often been underrepresented or have not had the investments or the accommodations that they really deserve. And that's, to us, that's what equity is about. And so some of those factors are, race, income, who's in poverty, who's not in poverty, who has access to a personal vehicle, who is transit dependent, who is employed, what's the level of education, are people living with disabilities. So there's a lot of factors that we need to be thinking about with equity, and there are different ways to respond to different factors. And so we really do look at our projects on a case-by-case basis.
Good morning.
But to help from an overall perspective, we've come up with an equity score using those demographic factors from the census. And that score, weights different factors, and we've come up with a ranking of 1 to 5 for each of our census blocks on what areas have the highest need. And this is the foundation for much of our capital programming effort. So this is a map of our equity score. You can see, the darker areas are the areas with the highest equity score, and then the lighter areas have the lowest equity score. And so we're really looking to prioritize our investments as much as possible in the areas of the most need. And we're using this in a couple different ways as we go through our various planning processes. So we've recently put together a transit equity study. We have a lot of people who live in Baltimore who are transit dependent. Some areas there is as high as 80% of a population within a census block that does not have access to a personal vehicle. So we have a very transit dependent population. And the transit equity study is looking at how can we really help the people who need to get where they need to go for jobs or for education or just to get the basic services that they need. And that transit equity study, it will be phased. Our first phase is focusing on how to really connect people to job opportunities. And we identified a couple of different areas throughout the city that we're calling priority transit equity zones. And you can see them here on this map. And what we're looking at we're looking at the transit shed and how long it takes someone who lives here to get to different job opportunities. So we've also looked at, where are locations of jobs where you don't need a college degree, but you can get a living wage. And in many of these cases, the people who live in these neighborhoods can't get to very many of those types of jobs within half an hour. And so that's really a focus of our transit equity study. And we're looking at a lot of other factors too. Safety is of a paramount concern. And we are working towards being a Vision Zero city. We have a strategic highway safety plan, but we do have a very serious safety concerns throughout our city. And when we look at crash severity, we're also seeing a pattern that a lot of our highest, the locations, either corridors or intersections that have the highest number of crashes also happen to be coinciding with some of our equity zones. And so these are top priorities for us to address safety. And you see here, this is from our strategic highway safety plan. This is for vehicular crashes, and we have a different map for pedestrian and bicyclist safety. And some of the same intersections and corridors are popping up between the two. And in some cases, they're different. But this is really helpful for us to look at those patterns and prioritize. These are the areas where we need to do some safety improvements most. So there's a lot of work that we have to do. We have a long way to go. And we've been operating on a budget that was cut back in about 2008. And the highway user revenue was, it was one of the main sources of our revenue for transportation investments in the capital program. And that revenue was cut by the Maryland General Assembly back in 2008. And this shows the pattern over time of what that highway user revenue has been since 2000. And this year, we still have not reached the level that we were in the year 2000. So we have been operating on a really restrictive budget for a really long time. And what that means is that our infrastructure is not meeting the needs of the people of Baltimore, because we're spread very thin with where we could invest our dollars. And the good news, though, is that this past year, the General Assembly passed a new law that the highway user revenue will be increased again, or the allocation will be increased for local jurisdictions again. And so we are, very gratefully and hopefully looking at a bigger bump starting in 2024 that will continue to go up through FY 26, 27, and 28. After 28, I don't know what's going to happen. We have to wait for the politicians down in Annapolis to figure that out. So we've been working, we have a lot of assets. We do not get any state highway support for any of our roadways. We are the only jurisdiction in Maryland that does not have any any help from state highway to do to do capital improvements. So this money has to be spread really, really thin. And so the kinds of things that we've been doing are what we're calling quick builds, because they're inexpensive and they can make a big difference. And we know that there are a lot of safety issues. And so what you see is there's a lot of paint and flex posts because they're cheap. Like, it's one of the few things that we could do with the budget that we've had so far. And so we have been focusing on a lot of traffic safety improvements and in some cases placemaking, using simple, inexpensive things like paint and flex posts. And what we're really doing is we're taking a look at how they're working, and little by little, we want to start putting real curb and concrete in where there's only paint and flex posts today. So I mentioned that there's, the General Assembly has this past year has a new law where they're going to change how the highway user revenue is allocated. And Baltimore City is very excited. We're the big winner because we get a much larger allocation. And we're looking at a pretty big bump in what our capital improvement program will be looking like once that revenue starts rolling in. It starts in FY24, which actually is July of next year. So it's a little less than a year away that FY24 will start. And you can see our projection. It's a pretty big bump, and there's a lot more that we can do with more money. And so we're really looking at what are these priorities and what are these investment needs? Where do we really need to have some state of good repair projects done? And we're able to do some things that have been kind of just on a wish list for a really long time. And so it's a really exciting time to be in my job and to be working at DOT and to be in Baltimore, where we're on the precipice of some big changes. So it is a big budget increase, but we have a lot of needs, and infrastructure is really expensive. So there are major projects that we want to do, like the Hanover Street Bridge, Keith Avenue, removing US 40, I-83. We have large infrastructure needs that are very expensive, and the increase in revenue that we're going to get is not going to be able to pay for it all. So we really need to be pursuing these new IIJA dollars. And this is, it's almost like the perfect storm where we have more revenue to work with, and there are these new federal grant opportunities. If we did not get that highway user revenue increase, we would not be able to pursue the IIJA grant opportunities that are out now, because they all require a minimum of a 20% match. And we don't have 20% to match for a lot of these big projects. And even now, with our projected increase in revenue, we still don't have even the 20% match. So we are actively looking for partners in a lot of cases. And if anyone here is from MDOT, I'm looking at you. So there are a couple of discretionary grants that we are pursuing actively now. You see the big red check by the RAISE grant, because that is one that we won, and celebration has ensued. So in partnership with the MTA, we just found out a couple weeks ago that we won a RAISE grant to do multimodal accessibility improvements around Penn Station. And this was on the heels of a win that we had last year to do the east-west priority transit corridor. I'm calling it Red Line 2.0. It's really looking at transit improvements for the orange and blue lines that go east-west across Baltimore. And that's in design now. And then we've applied for a couple other federal grants, including scenic byways, to do ADA infrastructure improvements along our scenic byways downtown. and a couple of safe routes to school grants, looking at sidewalk and bikeway improvements along MLK Boulevard, and some traffic calming and sidewalk and ADA improvements around Cecil Elementary. We are actively putting together grant applications for the Reconnecting Communities program to do a planning study to remove US 40, or what some people call the highway to nowhere, but it won't be a highway anymore. So I don't want to call it that. And then we're also actively working on a Safe Streets for All grant application to advance our strategic highway safety plan to be to meet the qualifications for their Vision Zero action plan, which we then hope we can use next year to pursue some bigger implementation money for Vision Zero projects. We're also pursuing a ferry grant to upgrade our harbor connector fleet. And we're considering the transit ADA grant, looking at railroad crossing improvements, and protect grant, looking at some stormwater improvements. These are still a little bit in flux because we need match money, which is not always easy to come by. And then there's also, and I'm not going to list all of these out because you can see them here, and you'll all get a copy of this presentation in a little bit. But we're really looking at in the future, in the next coming years, there are a lot of these discretionary grants that we want to be pursuing. And this is just some targets. There are more, and these are only the federal grants. There are also state and local grants that we're pursuing. And I'm not even going to get into those because that's just that'll take me forever. And to wrap up, I wanted to talk a little bit about reconnecting communities. This is getting a lot of attention from certain groups, and we really want to be, we want everyone to be aware of what we're doing. We are hoping everyone is on board with what we are doing. We are trying to be very transparent through this process and to really listen to what are the needs, because the West Baltimore area is an area that there have been many, many, many planning studies. Unfortunately, there has not been a lot of actual change. And the people of West Baltimore are frustrated. You know, people keep coming back to them over and over again doing planning studies, and you know, actual change is long overdue. But what's different is that with this project, this is a pretty significant funding source, and we can do a pretty significant project. We're not ready to do an implementation project. There isn't an actual alternative or design that we can move forward with yet. So we need to do a planning study first. And that planning study will be more of a technical feasibility study, which is different from the previous types of studies that have been done. There are a lot of vision plans, concepts, and this and that, but there is not a lot of good technical information that someone can actually use to do a final design from. And that's one of the big focuses. Another focus is that we want to, from a feasibility perspective, we want to know that what we're proposing is something that is constructible, is acceptable to the community. There have been a lot of different needs and things that we've heard that the community is interested in. And then also something that we can finance, because this is not going to be cheap. And we're going to need partners, and it's going to be more than a transportation facility. You know, it's over 600 acres, and we do not need 600 acres of highway through West Baltimore. You know, there's a lot of other things that we could be putting in that 600 acres. So we've heard a lot from stakeholders already in all of these previous planning studies and in some of the engagement that we're doing now. What we're hearing, and we've heard time and time again, infill development to reconnect a community, rebuild that urban fabric that was lost, make complete streets, improve transit, build the red line, that we hear that loud and clear, have higher density transit-oriented development, particularly on the ends near downtown and by the West Baltimore MARC station, avoid displacement. So this is something that is still very raw. The Route 40 was built over 50 years ago, and the displacement is still very raw. And people are concerned about gentrification with, new investment. They don't want to be displaced. And we have to make sure that that is not a result of this project. Also reflect and honor the area's history. So we really want to be looking at ways to document history, not only from before, but also culture, and celebrate the culture of the community today, and to really make that part of this project. This is West Baltimore, and it's not, re-envisioned in a way that it's going to be all new, but re-envisioned in a way that it's going to sort of fill in, the community will fill in again. Improving access to opportunities, particularly jobs. There was some talk before we started our presentation today about, there are a need for bus drivers, there are a need for freight drivers, there are a need for teachers, there are a need for all kinds of jobs. And the people of West Baltimore are looking for job opportunities. So how can we integrate that as a part of this project? And so these are some of the things that are, success metrics for us. If we're not doing these things as a part of the project, then the project's not successful. So we really want to make sure that this is the foundation of how we move forward. I talked a little bit about what we want to do. This is more of a technical study. It's more advanced than some of these vision plans that have been done in the past. And then it's got to be more than a planning study to start with. The community has been involved in a lot of planning studies. We need some immediate results. So what are some things that we could be doing now and through the planning process to provide support improvements to the people of West Baltimore? So interim community enhancements, traffic calming, streetscaping, ADA accessibility, integrating public art, social events, fellowship positions with local universities, working on the planning team with us, internships and apprenticeships, working with us as a part of the planning team, and historic interpretation and documentation. Our project webpage has a video. There is a local nonprofit group that has been producing a video about the history of this project. We've linked that to our webpage. I encourage you all to take a look at it. It's we have a site called Streets of Baltimore, and all of our planning studies are there. So you can find Reconnecting Communities and read about the project and watch the video. And so with that, I'm gonna wrap it up, and we could, Robin, if you want to go to questions or go to the next presenter.
Thank you, Allysha, for your excellent presentation. Yes, before we move to questions and open the floor to your comments, there were some that sent me a message in the chat. This presentation was delivered by Allysha Lorber. She is the Capital Planning Chief for the Baltimore City Department of Transportation. So we would now like to open the floor to questions, comments. You may either raise your hand or you can send us a chat, and I will get to those momentarily. So let's start with John.
Thank you, Robin. First, I just want to say the list of grants you're pursuing is very exciting. I think we haven't seen a list like that from any of our other jurisdictions, so kudos on that. I'm very excited to see you guys aggressively pursuing IIJA grants. My question is going back to the transit equity study you mentioned earlier, and kind of the transit priority zones. I was just curious whether that study is going to be more focused on, you mentioned that it was going to try to figure out how to improve transit access between those zones into jobs. Is that going to focus more on like Charm City circulator service, or is it going to focus more on roadway priority for kind of MTA service, or both?
So it's multifaceted because, transit equity and leveraging access to opportunity, there's no silver bullet. And there's so many different issues. So for our first phase, we're trying to focus on access to job opportunities. And so this study has been, we've been doing the study at the same time as the transit development plan for the Charm City Circulator. And so this did inform some of our route modifications that are part of the transit development plan, particularly route modifications that connect to our priority equity zones that today they do not connect to the priority equity zones. For example, Cherry Hill, Old Town, Upton. Those are communities that are not connected to the Charm City Circulator, which is the free bus, but our transit development plan does propose to connect those communities. But the transit equity study also is looking at partnerships with economic development to really bring in more job opportunities for like living wage job opportunities for people who don't have a college degree. That's kind of our target. So a lot of that happens to be with hospitals and with warehousing. Those are and freight and cargo movement, which Baltimore has a lot of both. But sometimes those job opportunities are not easy to access. So that's part of what we're looking at and working with the MTA to help improve service and change the times of service, because those types of job opportunities are not always 9-to-5 jobs. And so really looking at service for the times when people would need to get to work and to more efficiently connect to those places.
Thank you, Allysha. Jonathan?
Hi, Allysha.
Yeah, hi, Allysha.
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Jonathan's.
We have two Jonathans, forgive me. Jonathan Sussman.
that is confusing, is it not? Allysha, it's good to see you. Thank you for your presentation. That was really, really, informative and insightful. One question that I have about the Reconnecting Communities grant, and I know, the study, you're not to that point yet, applying for the grant to be able to do the study. But how do you plan on engaging residents or the descendants of residents who were displaced and who have felt kind of the biggest brunt of the, inequitable building of the highway to nowhere?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it is a really important to us. And that is something that we've been hearing is, a lot of these people who were affected might not be in West Baltimore anymore. So we are working to establish a new stakeholder advisory committee. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to have the stakeholder advisory committee before our grant application is due, but there's some work going on as far as identifying and figuring out who are the people that need to be on it. And there's a really big list. So it might need to be a stakeholder advisory committee for like different topics. And we're actively reaching out to community members, nonprofit groups, philanthropic groups who are very active in West Baltimore. And we're partnering with the MTA and Amtrak for match contributions. And both the MTA and Amtrak are very excited about working with us on this. And, I'm looking for as much help as possible to get the word out as far as possible. So please tell all your friends and colleagues and anyone who you think might be interested. But we're really trying to put the blitz out there. We talk to one group and then they tell us 5 more groups to talk to. So it's kind of been mushrooming. And it seems like just this past week, it's really gained a lot of momentum where there's been a lot more people who are kind of finding out about this and reaching out to us. And, we're keenly interested in partnering with like community development corporate or like nonprofit groups and neighborhood entities that are really active in West Baltimore, who really have boots on the ground and have a good like finger on the pulse of what the needs are in West Baltimore and being able to help support them be more successful in helping the people of West Baltimore.
Thank you.
Thanks, Allysha.
We have time for 3 more questions. I would ask that you please keep it brief before we move to our next presentation. And as always, you may type a message in the chat. I will make sure and share that information with our respective guest speakers. Jonathan Sachs, did you have a question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot. And thanks, Allysha, for the presentation. Just a quick question on the Reconnecting Communities grant. Two quick questions, actually. The first one is, do you plan on pursuing funds from that same Reconnecting Communities grant bucket for a project to cover the JFX? That's the first question. And the second question is, best case scenario, realistically, what's the timeline look like for a Highway to Nowhere reimagined? Thanks.
Okay, so first question about I-83. We plan to only pursue one Reconnecting Communities grant per year. And we might be pursuing one every year until the IIJA expires, which right now is 2026. So like we got to get them in. And so, and part of that is because it is highly unlikely, you know, we think highly unlikely that one jurisdiction will win more than one type of grant per cycle. So we're really focusing on our first priority, which is US 40. And we're also looking at I-83. I talked to some folks about some other potential grant ideas for that one. And we're also interested in Druid Park Lake Drive and a couple others that are also really well suited to this funding program. And your second question was about the timeline. So my goal is to complete the planning study before 2026 when IIJA expires so that we can pursue a larger implementation grant.
So sorry, just to follow up, was that a no on pursuing JFX, a flat no? You're only going to concentrate on Highway to Nowhere, or
This year.
is the JFX a possibility for next year, the year after, that sort of thing?
Correct. We are not pursuing
Okay.
the JFX Reconnecting Communities this year.
This year. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Klaus, do you have a brief comment or question for Allysha?
Excellent presentation, Allysha. And as Allysha knows, the AIA is trying to support the grant application with an event on September 8th at the AIA Architecture Center downtown, in which we give all the ones that have had ideas, plans in the past about the Highway to Nowhere, that includes students and other stakeholders, to do a Pecha Kucha 5-minute each presentation on September 8th. So if you're interested, I put in the chat link the Eventbrite application or registration to go there. Thanks.
Thank you. And Jim, we'll have you as our last question. If you could please keep it brief, we would appreciate it.
Thank you. Allysha, I'm very impressed by your presentation, and I appreciate all the work your team's been doing on this matter. There are two areas I thought you might want to thread into what you're doing. One is that it would be a good idea for the city to constantly look at its overall per capita transportation assistance from the state compared to the surrounding areas. And I'm really focused especially on Anne Arundel and Baltimore counties, which are the most related to Baltimore. The other comment I'd make is, I know there's been talk about creating a special study area for the West Baltimore MARC station. I'd say one thing that occurs to me is that this really is an interdisciplinary question that goes all the way from, let's say, central Baltimore out through West Baltimore MARC. And at some point, it might need the kind of integrated management group like Charles Center Inner Harbor to handle, you know, things like infrastructure and all the other things that are connected to what you're attempting to do, and also which will take an inordinate amount of your attention away from the comprehensive performance of the transportation infrastructure of Baltimore City. So just those two thoughts. I'll be quiet at this point. But thank you for a great job.
Without further ado, we would like to now introduce our next guest speakers, Todd Lang, who is the Director of Transportation Planning, and Don Halligan, who's the Senior Transportation Planner, both with the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. They are going to present today a summary of multimodal planning efforts at the Baltimore Regional Transportation Board and Baltimore Metropolitan Council. Gentlemen, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Robin, and thank you for the invitation. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces and names, and we really welcome this invitation to talk about some of the efforts that we've been doing on behalf of our board over the past couple of years, and to look forward into some of the new activities that have been approved through our work program. So I'm going to lead off the presentation with a little bit of what we have been doing over the past couple of years. Don's going to pick it up and start talking about our existing work program. And I also see Sheila Mahoney, our transit planner, is also on board. So if we forget anything or say anything wrong, she can certainly jump in. It's always the best place to do that. So it's been a little while since we've talked to the group. It's always good to kind of remind everyone about the kind of unusual organization that we represent. Both Don, Sheila, and I, we work for the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. That is a nonprofit that serves a board known as the Baltimore Metropolitan Council, which is made up of the mayor, the county executives, a state senator, a state delegate, and a governor's appointee. That really serves as a council of governments, the BMC, or Baltimore Metropolitan Council. But we also serve as staff to the Baltimore Regional Transportation Board, which is the federally designated metropolitan planning organization for the region. These are required by federal law for any urbanized area with a population of over 50,000. There are 7 MPOs in the state of Maryland, including Hagerstown, Cumberland, Salisbury, St. Mary's County, a big one for the National Capital Region, and then one up in the Wilmington area that comes down into Cecil County. These organizations plan and program federal transportation funding. So again, state government organizes and plans what state funding is going to occur. Local governments have their local capital improvement programs. This board is the one that actually approves federal transportation funding. It's currently made up of 10 voting members, very similar, the mayor, the county executives, Maryland Department of Transportation, and 5 non-voting members. As a requirement of federal law, this board is required to develop an annual work program that's known as the Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP. We hate acronyms, but we have to say them all the time, so we apologize. Again, this is about a $9 billion annual work program of federal transportation planning activities for the region. We do get 80% federal funding for this work program, and we have a local match that is made by the Maryland Department of Transportation and the local dues to the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. So with this money, we fund the BMC staff to really serve the BRTB, meet all of the requirements of the Metropolitan Planning Organization. But we also have some funding to do what were known as focus areas. In the past couple of years, we've kind of pivoted from looking at individual projects and individual jurisdictions, corridors, those types of areas. And we've really pivoted to trying to improve the capacity of our local jurisdictions and be able to address emerging issues, emerging transportation technologies. And this has really kind of been a change in the way that we do work. It's really trying to build up our local jurisdictions to get ready for activities that in the future. Our work program, we run on a state fiscal year, so it goes July 1st to June 30th. We developed this work program with a draft that goes out for a 30-day public review in February, and it's adopted by our board in April. So it's a little bit of a look ahead in terms of what the studies that we are going to be doing. So I'm going to quickly go through 3 slides of some work that is either currently going on or has recently been completed. Then Don's going to pick up with some of the upcoming studies that we're doing. One of the areas that our local governments have been really prioritizing is understanding what type of pedestrian infrastructure we have on the ground right now. So what types of trails, what types of sidewalks, what type of crosswalks do we have right now? And where are those gaps? So we can better plan and focus our limited dollars on trying to really improve the situation where we have large pedestrian activities. So this is developing a GIS-based tool for our members to again give them a good picture of what's out there right now, trying to again focus our limited dollars. Another study that we did was after the realignment of the MTA bus routes. We did a study of the bus stops that actually have transfer locations between MTA services and the locally operated transit systems. We identified 97 different transfer locations. And what we wanted to do is kind of make sure that those bus stops where there are transfers were hopefully co-located. There weren't barriers between the two different systems. We were also looking at bus schedules. We were looking at the number of people that are transferring between the lot systems and MTA at those individual locations, trying to make sure that the heavy areas of transfers have the right types of infrastructure in terms of shelters, benches, trash cans, lighting, those types of areas. We also developed a bus stop assessment tool and locally operated transit systems. We've been doing some inventories just to make sure that we have a good idea of all the different bus stops in the entire region and what they start to look like. Another one we're doing is the role of shared use mobility and development review. So a lot of our planning and development programs within our local jurisdictions are getting new site plans in with Uber and Lyft drop-off sites, with scooter locations, bike sharing locations. And again, we wanted to make sure that our local jurisdiction staff had the tools at their disposal to better understand how to best fit those into site plan review processes. Since they're new and evolving, we wanted to make sure that they understood what are some of the zoning impacts of these different types of areas and the best, as I said, kind of implement them within these site plans. Another thing is each one of our local jurisdictions has a different capital improvement program. They have a different agency that pulls together the capital improvement program, a different way for some of the transportation departments to actually submit projects into those capital improvement programs for consideration. And we found that some of our jurisdictions have good methods to try to promote healthy transportation investments within these capital improvement programs, not only here at the local level, but also at the national level. So how can we best promote healthy communities by utilizing the prioritization methodologies within our capital improvement programs? We reviewed all of our capital improvement programs and then made some best recommendations moving forward for all of them. We've been looking at different greenways. I saw a question about the Baltimore greenway system. We're hopefully going to get there soon, but our board has been funding different greenway plans. First one was a master plan for the Patapsco Regional Greenway that goes from the Inner Harbor all the way up into Sykesville, a 40-mile shared use trail, hopefully in the future. We've also funded 3 30% segment designs, one from Guinness to Elkridge, one up in Sykesville, and the latest is Guinness in towards Southwest Area Park. And our board has been consistent in funding the development of these greenway plan segments. And hopefully we'll get to some of them more in the Baltimore city area. Another area we have and we run the regional travel demand model known as Insight. It actually predicts the travel of 5 million people, not only in the Baltimore region, but because of our interactions, we model Montgomery, Prince George's. We've added Queen Anne's, York, and Adams counties because of the interactions there. So again, this gives us the ability to predict travel out to the year 2050, utilizing employment and housing projections out to those dates. And then this is the model that actually goes into the project development process for things like the East-West Transit Corridor and helps kind of predict ridership in all of these different corridors. We're doing a study on the historic town centers within the Baltimore region. We have just a number of small historic town centers that really have a lot of challenges when you're looking at transit access, bicycle, pedestrian access, those types of areas, parking management, wayfinding. They're fairly similar in terms of the challenges that they face. So we're going to be kind of working through those, trying to hopefully give better tools to be able to address some of these areas in these small towns. As Allysha was looking at, we're developing region-wide crash and transportation data dashboards, so we can do all of the overlays that she was looking at, and not only just look at one jurisdiction, but look at all of the jurisdictions and the interactions. We did review and best practices of what used to be known as traffic impact studies. We like to call them now transportation impact studies, because they used to be heavily focused on just vehicular traffic. We are now looking at best practices for multimodal analysis, including safety, including the APFO or adequate public facilities ordinances, and how we can better fully address the impacts of these new developments and try to mitigate those impacts. We're doing a planning process review, going from the concept site plan all the way up to the permit approval, trying to make sure that we understand how best transportation issues can be addressed within that. And we also, our board is setting aside funds for transportation land use connections programs, again, 30% design for these projects that really need seed money so that they can ultimately move into the final design phase. We've just recently awarded ones to Annapolis and to the city of Baltimore on Wabash Avenue. So we're looking forward to having more funding to continue some seed money for these projects. And I'm going to turn it over to Don now, who can quickly run through some of our upcoming work programs.
Hi, good morning, Don Halligan, BMC. This list of projects is our total list in our FY23 work program. I'm going to talk about not all these, but some of these that I think are important to the group. The first is the safe systems approach. What we are expecting to do is release a RFP to get some contractual support to help us review best practices in this area, look at the safe system approach and develop guidelines for the BRTB and the members to use when they're designing and planning their systems. The safe systems approach was adopted by USDOT as part of their towards zero deaths effort, and it aims to eliminate fatal and serious injuries for all road users. It's a shift from the conventional approach, conventional zero death approach, because it focuses on human mistakes and human vulnerability, and places importance in redundancies. The next project is similar to the last insofar as it's a consultant effort to help us to look at best practices and develop guidelines for siting and designing electric vehicle charging station infrastructure. This will help our members when they're planning and siting EV charging stations across the region. The next is an effort to develop and define recommendations for the region and local jurisdictions on preparing for connected and automated vehicles in the region. A contractor we hope to get will help us work with the steering committee that we're going to create from local membership to create these recommendations and guidelines, and work on a variety of issues such to prepare for CAVs, policy issues, legal issues, capital operating and maintenance issues. That'll be important as we move into the future and see more of these vehicles. The next effort is there's been a lot of work on local government at the local government level, defining jurisdictional plans for bicycle networks. This is something different. It'll create a vision for a regional bike network connecting our communities together, provide low stress access to jobs and other activities. This is familiar to everybody. In this group, certainly COVID had a huge impact on transit ridership. So everybody's acutely aware of that, and it's placed a big challenge on us in our transit system. Really, this is in response to the question about what to do now. And we're going to try and understand how others are thinking about it, what others are doing, and develop some best practices and hopefully some recommendations on what we can do to help bring back some of the riders and improve our transit system. This is an effort proposed to evaluate a potential for a consortium among our human service transportation providers in the region. Again, it's going to be a contractual. We're going to get a contractor on board. They'll look at. They'll be convening work groups, doing surveys, looking to bring folks together to talk about how we might work together as a region and coordinate services among the various jurisdictions in the region. The goal of this project is to identify and document the impact of transportation fees, fines, and fares on residents in the region, particularly on low income and vulnerable populations. We hope to identify key fees, fines, and fares and evaluate their impact on these populations. Try to summarize some of these revenue sources, identify and evaluate strategies to alleviate the financial burden on lower income individuals in the region, and understand what some of the trade-offs are going to be between affordability strategies and then ensuring the transportation system is still going to generate enough revenue to meet the needs to continue to improve the system. This is a continuation of the planning that was identified, the plans, the corridors that were identified in the RTP, the Regional Transportation Plan by MTA. We are supporting the MTA by doing some of these. We've undertaken the first one in BWI to Columbia. This will be a continuation of that effort and look at the next corridor. This is outside of our work program, and it's really done by Todd had mentioned, this is not a BRTB effort per se, but this is a BMC effort. And is outside of our work program, but you may have heard about this. It's our, I know I've talked to this group before in the past about our transit governance and funding study. This will continue that effort to try and refine the 6 alternatives that we identified for governance in that effort that ended in last December. The BMC board of directors appointed a work group. I believe some of you are, at least John Larry I saw on the call is a member of that work group. We hope to begin that work in September 2nd. And we want to continue to refine the work that we began back last year to come up with a firm recommendation for the new administration coming in on transit governance and funding for the region. That's all I had. I'm hoping that we can have a conversation either here or offline. Happy to talk to you at any point. Thank you.
Thank you, Don, and thank you, Todd, for a very informative presentation. You're doing great work. We appreciate all of your efforts on behalf of, transportation and related issues throughout our city and state. if you would kindly remove the presentation, I'd like to open the floor to questions and comments for either Don or Todd. Klaus, I still see a hand up. Did you have a question?
No, that hand is still up from before, sorry.
That's not a problem. Well, let me go into the chat, because I believe, Sue, are you with us? Okay, I think that she is on mute. Okay, so she is with us via chat. Let me see if I can pull up her chat.
Yeah, I can, I see it, Robin. So yeah, the question is regarding some of the pedestrian infrastructure work that we're doing in terms of potential ADA compliance. So what we've been able to do is we're trying to identify on a regional basis where pedestrian infrastructure is in terms of trails, sidewalks, crosswalks. The specific question was about Baltimore City DOT trying to do ADA upgrades. I think this is supporting those efforts to try to understand where the facilities are. It's not an engineering-based program, so we don't necessarily have all of the ADA measurements for slopes and landing pads and all the rest of those areas. This is more of a planning effort on a larger scale to try to understand where we have infrastructure in general. And then hopefully from this effort, work can be done at the more microscopic level to address specific ADA issues within that area. So hopefully we're supporting these local efforts through our program, but again, most of the work we do is at the regional level at a larger scale that might not be applicable for some of those questions. Hope that helps.
Excellent, thank you. And Todd or Don, could you speak a little more about the collaboration with Baltimore City DOT? It sounds like you are sort of working in tandem on a number of key projects. We think it's just so important in terms of collaboration and partnership so that we are moving forward on the same page with a single voice in that spirit. So are there other projects that you are working with Baltimore City DOT on that you can share relative to transportation?
Yeah, Todd mentioned we had awarded in our transportation land use planning connections program an award to Baltimore City. The award is about it was for $80,000 of contractual support, and so we'll be doing planning work, design work, 30% design for the Wabash Avenue cycle track, which runs from the Wabash Metro Station up to Reisterstown Metro Station. So it's a 2-mile section on Wabash Avenue. The intent here is to be have a separated bike tracks in the separated bike plan for the city. And it'll connect 3 transit stations. So, and it'll connect potentially other trails that will lead to the Jones Falls Trail. So it'll really open up. It's a key link in the plan and in the system, and what has potential to really opening up that northwest part of the city. So we're very excited about that.
Well, you must have been reading my mind because I was going to ask about the Jones Falls Trail. So that's great news. Are there any other questions or comments? John?
Yeah. Hey, Todd and Don. We're very excited at the partnership about the regional transit funding work group. I just had a question, and I might have missed this, but I see the locally operated transit systems are well represented on the work group, but I don't see anyone from MDOT or MTA.
can you talk about how kind of this group is planning to liaise with them or
We expect MTA to be in the room. They, as you recall, there was legislation that was not signed by the governor. And so we know they're interested. Clearly, it's going to impact their system. So we expect that they'll be participating, but not at the table.
and those meetings are open to the public, correct?
They are.
Perfect. Thank you.
We expect to have a virtual option too.
Oh, awesome.
Well, we will conclude our meeting for today by thanking again each of our special guests.
Robin, can I make some comments?
Sure.
First of all, it's a very exciting time because of the federal funding coming in. And it's so great to see Alyssa's presentation, to see CityDOT so engaged and taking advantage of the opportunities that can come our way. And to have such great leadership at CityDOT with Steve Sharkey and Alysha, at BMC with Don and Todd. One of the goals of Transit Choices from the beginning is to create a unified vision for how transit can move forward in this region. And I feel like Todd and Don are working on that. So all in all, it's just very exciting to me to see this after 10 years of doing this, to see this where we stand right now is very exciting. And I want to make sure we thank all the people who are participating by listening to these presentations, because it's your participation that enables us to keep bringing these kind of interesting presentations to the public in a way that no other transit advocacy group does. So thank you all for participating. Thank you for the presenters.
Hear, hear. So we wish all of you a wonderful day. We will stay in touch. We will be sure to share today's presentations as well as the meeting recordings. As always, if you have any questions or if there's input that you would like to share, feel free to email me at robin@transitchoices.org. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.